Thank you for joining us for this news update. I'm Jill Valley. In just a few moments, Montana Governor Steve Bullock is set to announce new measures to provide relief to Montanans impacted by COVID-19 and ensure hospitals have the financial stability to continue. Let's now go to Helena for what the governor has to say.
About Montana being one big community. We really are all in this together. I think it's important to recognize that no matter how challenging these days may be, we remember to look around and to see the good. It's important to remember that most people who have this disease actually have mild symptoms, enough to be able to recover at home. Of those COVID-19 positive cases in Montana thus far, 32 have been released from isolation and have recovered. This serves as a reminder that we will overcome these challenging times. And there are many Montanans who are working around the clock to ensure access to needed resources, to keep our families safe during this time. There are the grocery store employees who are working tirelessly to keep the shelves stocked. Truck drivers delivering supplies to fill those shelves. Gas station employees making sure that we have gas in our tanks. Teachers fulfilling that same dedication to providing a high quality education, doing so through creative means with distance learning. First responders working extra shifts to respond to the extra need. And there are Montana's health workers, doctors, nurses, CNAs, pharmacists, and pharmacy techs, custodians, receptionists, and more, who fight COVID-19 while ensuring Montanans can access other essential medical care. It really does take all of us. And I'm humbled and inspired every day to see Montanans looking out for one another. As we continue to watch out for each other, it remains one of my top priorities certainly to find ways to ease the hardships on Montanans financially while we are in this state of emergency. As Montanans take seriously the responsibility to stay home to slow the spread of COVID-19, they shouldn't also have to worry about whether they can keep a roof over their heads or if they'll have running water. They shouldn't have to worry about having the heat turned off if they can't pay the rent or make their monthly utility bill. Today I'm issuing a directive that prohibits landlords from evicting tenants from their homes who cannot pay the rent during the stay-at-home order. It also prohibits late fees or other penalties due to late or non-payment of rent during the stay-at-home order. This directive also stops residential foreclosures due to non-payment for the duration of the stay-at-home order. Now let me be clear, this directive, it's not a free pass on rent or on home debt. Tenants and homeowners still need to meet their obligations and should do so on time where they can. But so long as this virus forces Montanans to stay home to save lives, Montanans need a home to stay in. That also means providing for essential utilities that allow Montanans to remain safely in their homes. Montanans and Montana businesses take care of one another. So many Montana businesses have already stepped up on this front, and I want to especially commend them and their work and their dedication to all of our communities. Even before this directive, every single provider of electricity in Montana, including Northwestern Energy, MDU, and every single electric co-op or cooperative, they had agreed to voluntarily stop service disconnections for the duration of the COVID emergency. Water providers are stepping up too, voluntarily suspending disconnects as well. And our internet companies, which are so vital now that kids are at home for distance learning, they're also stepping up and suspending service disconnections. In line with that leadership from private industry, the directive prevents, or prohibits rather, suspension of utilities during the emergency, including electricity, gas, sewage disposal, water, telephone or internet services, and it also prohibits late fees for bills due to the directive. This is a common sense measure that reflects how our communities really have come together. States across the country, red and blue, like Indiana and Iowa and Arizona, they've all done the same to protect their citizens. Well, we're asking Montanans to stay home to stop the spread of this virus. Montanans need to know that we got their back. Additionally, today I issued a directive that allows Montana hospitals and related facilities to receive financing to remain open and acquire supplies needed to respond to COVID-19. This directive will allow healthcare, medical, and related facilities to receive financing under the Montana Facility Finance Authority Act for operating expenses connected to COVID-19. Montana health facilities have lost revenues due to delayed non-critical procedures or from working to acquire supplies. Rural hospitals have been particularly impacted. While the federal stimulus package or the CARES Act will provide for support for operating expenses, that funding will likely take time. Allowing this financing will provide an immediate need for healthcare facilities to purchase supplies, pay staff, and remain open. For weeks, both rural and urban hospitals have served on the front lines of this crisis, and they need our support to continue protecting Montanans. Also of note, yesterday I directed that travelers arriving from another state or country to Montana for non-work related purposes undergo a 14-day self-quarantine. The directive applies to both Montana residents and non-residents entering our state for non-work related purposes. While Montana and Montanans, we love our visitors, we are directing that they not come visit while we're watching out for one another by staying at home. This action is warranted both to protect our healthcare system and to protect against community spread of COVID-19. The Montana Department of Commerce will be advising vacation listing and rental sites that they must notify potential out-of-state renters of this quarantine requirement. I've also authorized the National Guard to conduct temperature checks in Montana's major airports and major rail stations. They'll also be screening for potential exposure history for travelers arriving in Montana from another state or country at our airports. This is a significant and serious thing to do, and it's the right thing to do for all travelers in protection of the greater good of Montanans. I'd also like to share that it was, I guess, last Friday when the first 2-week closure statewide of our schools had expired, and all 400 of Montana's school districts have submitted plans, and those plans have been reviewed. The plans inform how they're implementing ways to provide students with quality public education through remote learning, how they're providing school meals, services to students with disabilities, and other services customarily provided to students in schools. As a governor and as a parent of 3 school-aged children, I'm so pleased that our school administrators and our teachers have shown incredible leadership during these unprecedented times. They've acclimated quickly to a new way of supporting students and staff, and collectively have ensured that students are able to receive a quality education and the services Montanans rely on during school closures through April 10th or longer if indeed necessary. As such, I will be waiving the pupil instruction time requirements through the time of the directive of April 10th for all school districts, and districts will continue to receive state funding during this time. Now, as many of you know, for the past several weeks I've participated in a weekly or sometimes twice weekly call with other governors around the country and with Vice President Pence and senior administration officials and sometimes the President. Yesterday, someone released portions of that call where I raised concerns with supplies, both PPE and testing on that call. As governor, it's my priority to make sure that Montanans' concerns are being heard and addressed. The purpose of these calls really is for governors to raise concerns in order to find solutions. No matter a rural or an urban state, all governors face many of the same challenges with COVID-19, and that includes ensuring adequate supplies, whether in our healthcare facilities, for our first responders, or for testing. We have been fortunate thus far in Montana that our state labs have been able to perform tests on all of the tests it receives with a pretty darn quick turnaround. But I do continue to have concerns that if the national supply chain were to fall through, even for one day, that we'd fall behind in our ability to test the current intake that we have. And as I've also said before, I continue to have concerns about the availability of the supplies to conduct the testing and those supplies like swabs and reagents. I don't want a day to go by without being able to perform tests. I'd also like to be able to make testing further available so that we can contact and trace, particularly in our harder hit communities like Gallatin County, so that we can aggressively be working in partnership with local public health to prevent this virus from spreading. So I'll certainly continue standing up for Montanans to ensure that we receive more hospitals, supplies, and testing supplies. And that means continue to work with our federal partners and private partners to access these resources. And it's something that we're doing pretty much on a daily basis. So to all the journalists, thanks for all your work. And thank you to all Montanans all across our state who are taking this period of a stay-at-home directive seriously. We can slow the spread of COVID-19. Thanks again. I'll open it up for questions from members of the media. Those of you on the phone, if you'd like to ask a question, you can press 5*. You'll be notified that your hand is raised. When we unmute your phone, you'll be notified that you've been called on to ask your question. If you raise your hand but have already received an answer to your question, you can lower it by also pressing 5*.
First phone question.
First phone question. Please go ahead if you're unmuted. Speak away.
Move on to the next one.
Go ahead, please. All of you could try talking once, and one of you are unmuted. I assume it's on. There's a little light. Okay, please.
With this announcement to provide this relief to people who are maybe renting these properties, do you also plan to provide some sort of support for landlords that will go without their source of income during these times?
Well, first and foremost, I hope that just about every renter does actually, if you can pay on time, pay on time. But when I have a directive of saying it's a stay-at-home order so that people need to be in homes, that the relief is waiving the penalties and interests on if one cannot pay rent. I'd strongly encourage everyone that can to pay rent, but there isn't anything in this directive that provides like state funding to those landlords.
Try another phone question.
Another phone question. I got a feeling.
It's on.
Well, please.
Governor John Amy with
Yeah, John.
KXLF. Obviously, you got a lot of national attention with the phone call with the president. Can you tell us what you said to him, his reaction, And will you get any
Well,
testing equipment?
yeah, I mean, parts of that phone conversation was released and it wasn't released by me. So what hopefully you heard is continuing concerns. Look, on the one hand, it's and I've said this in these before, it's expected that we go through private supply chains to get the materials that we need, but often those private supply chains, either we are preempted, meaning that we'll place an order, that order will be canceled because either the federal government has requested those, or at times there's interstate competition going on. So expressed my concerns with the continuing supplies of both testing as well as PPE, the equipment to keep our hospital workers and our first responders safe. And Dr. Fauci spoke a little bit about some of the things that we could do. Heard some good from the perspective of that there's some new faster testing coming from Abbott Labs, which Montana can expect, not sure when, a number of those testing machines. But it's nothing that is unique in as much as that in one way or another, states all across the country have raised these concerns about supplies, including test kits, probably just about each and every call. On the phone. I can't, so why don't we put... Okay, go ahead, Holly.
Hey, I'm wondering what the state is doing to track compliance with the stay-at-home order, what sort of things you're looking at to see if people are following that rule.
So there's nothing at the state... No, it's not going to work too well. There's nothing at the state level necessarily that, like, we're out there, but we know that, first of all, Montanans are complying to take care of one another. And it's something that local authorities, to the extent that there's concerns about businesses still operating or others, that local authorities do have enforcement authority. But this isn't about rounding up people, it's about Montanans taking care of one another in a time of what it really is a public health crisis.
Piggybacking off of his question, so obviously you mentioned in the phone call from President Trump that we're one day away from being without tests. So do we have tests right now in Montana? Are people being tested right now?
We do. We have 1,600 test kits available. The frustration has been, part of the frustration is that up through Thursday or Friday of last week, at most, we could order 600 tests that would cover 600 people a day. And I mean, we have days where we run 500 tests, and we're running 500 tests through the state lab. Deliveries don't occur on Sunday. So that if we lost one day, or if all of a sudden we had a huge spike in testing, all of a sudden we'd start creating a significant backlog along the way. Raised concerns last week about it. We got, at least for now, an extra number of test kits. Had a call with the director of FEMA last Friday, expressing some of the concerns as well. This is something we're working on each and every day. But one thing that people should take from this, that we're working on each and every day, both through private supply chains and asking of the federal government to provide resources through FEMA and CDC, but also that in Montana, there has been no one turned away from tests because we don't have enough test kits. But we'll continue to be working, because it is a daily basis to make sure not only that we have the test kits, but that we have the swabs. It was, I think, a week ago Monday or the week before, where all of a sudden one of our suppliers of swabs canceled our order because of the need for federal resources. So we either have to be able to get it from the private market or the federal government. We have to have supply chains for these materials. And something that is concerning to me, continues to be concerning to me, but instead of just being concerned on it, that we continue to find every avenue to do so. And also raise concerns from the federal authorities in as much as, and that's what that released part of that conversation was, is that far too often, I mean, I don't want us looking at, as a nation, when I'm asking so much of Montanans and Montana businesses, like we got to make sure that the resources that we need are coming here, just like every other state needs to ensure that the resources that they need are coming there.
Another phone question.
Another phone question.
Hello, Eric Fisher with Montana Free Press. Repeat my question from last time. Do you have information at this point on where in the state people are being tested? And, for example, do we know with confidence that there aren't holes in rural communities where not people have been tested to be confident that the disease isn't there?
To be confident, well, anyone in an urban or rural community that shows symptoms of having COVID-19 and then has either traveled from an area of concern or had contact with someone that is COVID-19 is positive. Had late last week a call with all hospital administrators asking, and that's urban and rural, asking them if they had heard of situations where someone that is symptomatic with his indicia have not been being tested, and I haven't heard of anywhere to date.
Maybe a better way to phrase the question is the state doing proactive testing instead of waiting for patients to come in? Are you looking at doing like monitoring type testing anywhere?
To date, we are not going out and doing like testing of people that aren't symptomatic. No.
Thank you.
Another phone question.
Another phone question.
Governor Bullock, this is Nikki Willett from Yellowstone Public Radio. Thanks so much for holding the call. Can you help me picture the Montana National Guard's role in enforcing the quarantine
Sure.
of people coming into the state? Like, are they going to be able to detain someone who registers with fever?
No. So what will happen, Nikki, is that an airplane will unload. They will temperature check everyone coming off of that airplane, give them some information about the request for or the directive of a mandatory self-quarantine. To the extent that someone has a temperature, then that individual will be asked to then have an immediate consult with a doctor, and that'll be by telephone or by video. To the extent that they have a temperature, we'll also then provide that information after we make a request of where that they'll be sheltering for the next 2 weeks. We'll provide that information to local public health authorities to follow through. But no, the National Guard won't be, I haven't given them arrest power to do so. My expectation is that anybody that visits Montana acts just like Montanans are, and that we're courteous and we're neighborly and we actually listen to one another.
All right, you've been listening to Governor Steve Bullock, who had a couple of things to say today. One of the highlights, 32 people who were diagnosed with COVID-19 have recovered and are now back out of isolation. So there's some positive news there as the state continues to try to get more test kits to test those people who feel they may have the virus. He expanded on his stay-at-home directive, saying that no one will be evicted due to a lack of payment, no late fees, and no residential foreclosures. For now, a lot of people aren't working and can't pay their rent or mortgage. It's not a free pass. You still have to pay it, but at least you will not be kicked out of your home. You will also not lose service for power, water, or internet, and you will not incur late fees for those who cannot pay their bills right now because you've either been laid off or otherwise disrupted due to coronavirus. We're going to break this all down for you coming up on the 5:30 news.